seminar. Better scoot. My name is Steve Fridsma. I'm an architect, and I'm the Worship and Learning Environments Leader at Progressive AE. Progressive AE is a 48-year-old architecture and engineering firm here in Grand Rapids. I came to Michigan to come to Calvin. Calvin was, at the time, in 1987, I graduated from high school. Calvin was the only Christian liberal arts college with a pre-architecture track to get to grad school. And I ended up staying here, getting an art degree, and then going on to U of M for my master's. But I've been blessed with the opportunity to teach interim a couple times, 4 times, teach interim in the pre-architecture program. And I've been a worship leader at 4 different Christian Reformed churches, and in leadership of 2 home missions church plants, most recently Monroe Community Church in downtown Grand Rapids. And if any of you, I know Andrew was on the tour, did anyone else go on the bus tour? Okay. Yesterday, we went and looked at 4 different churches around town and how they exemplified certain principles of placemaking, especially in the context of worship and how the facility would be used for gathering and for assembly. The symposium asked me to also present on sustainability. And this is a growing topic in architecture, but also in faith circles. We have done over 500 church projects in the last 48 years. And increasingly, no matter if it's something that's contemporary or traditional, our clients want to know, well, how is this facility going to be sustainable? And we ask them, well, what do you mean by sustainability? And their answers are sometimes across the board. There's a lot of buzzwords. And what we usually tell them is, well, it's really all about stewardship. It can be confusing as you go through the grocery store, and nearly every homemaking magazine is about green cleaners, or it's about green cooking, or it's about green washers and dryers. Everything's green. There's all these buzzwords, and you don't know if someone's trying to sell you a bill of goods just to buy their product. And this presentation will have a little bit of tips, and I'll also point you to some resources in what these concerns are about. But as we wear, as church designers, as we wear our faith hat and as we wear our design hat, we've found a helpful tool in understanding stewardship and creation care. And I give this presentation a lot to some very conservative, maybe evangelical fundamentalist denominations who are like, environmentalism, Al Gore. We're not going there. And and then there are more mainline denominations that are already tracking. Maybe they have a denominational statement on care of creation. Even Chuck Colson agrees. Environmentalism doesn't need to be about a radical political agenda. It is common sense and, most importantly, thoroughly Christian. And we agree. In 1994, as the term green was becoming more vogue and people were starting to have concerns about the environment, an economist in England named John Elkington wrote a book called Cannibals with Forks, in which he proposed the idea of the triple bottom line. And until that point, a lot of environmental conversations were about the spotted owl, the polar bear, preserving species. It was all about the environmental aspect. And John correctly extrapolated those concerns to say, well, we need to be concerned in 3 spheres, not just the planet. True sustainability blesses people and creates social justice. And if we're only pouring money at it and there's no benefit coming back, that's not sustainable either. So for an initiative or a policy to be truly sustainable, he argued that there should be natural capital that's built by protecting the planet, human capital that's built by blessing people, and economic capital that means that we can be profitable at this too. So he's thinking about it more broadly. Now you see most Fortune 500 companies, at the end of the year, they issue their triple bottom line statement. Our firm does it. We're not Fortune 500, but you can go online, go on a lot of websites and see how companies have adopted this thinking in terms of true sustainability. And we're looking at this and saying, okay, that is biblical. We started to examine it, especially as we were talking to churches or saying, how do we do this sustainability thing? I know it's going to save us money, but why else should we do it? Well, if we are about protecting the planet, and actually if we love God first, right? The Shema is love God and love your neighbor. The first and second commandment. If we're loving God, I think we ought to love what God loves. We ought to honor what God honors. We ought to respect the way that God, one of the ways that God has chosen to reveal himself to us. So just when we think of the two creation stories in Genesis, God says creation is very good. After the flood, God makes a covenant that our English says with the whole earth. The Hebrew is the cosmos. He made a covenant with the cosmos after the flood. The psalmist says many times he glories in nature, but one of the key ones is Psalm 24:1. The earth belongs to God and the fullness thereof. In Job and in Matthew, the stories of the sparrow, God is aware of every creature. That means God is aware that due to us, there's no more passenger pigeons, there's no more dodo birds, there's other species that are being wiped out due to carelessness or over-harvesting. And creation praises and reveals God. This is one of my favorites. Paul writes that natural revelation is so strong and so impactful, and God reveals himself in it to such a degree that we're without excuse in recognizing the holy in it. And unfortunately, when you drive through Camden, New Jersey, and all the billowing smoke from the concrete factories, that doesn't bring glory to God. In fact, that kind of hides nature from us. There's a 5,700 square mile area off the coast of the Mississippi Delta in Louisiana, where all the phosphorus and nitrogen that we dump down the Mississippi drain reacts with the oxygen in the water, causes algae blooms, and there's not enough oxygen for a lot of fish species to survive. So the mammals can go through, but there's a lot of ocean life that's dead now. We're doing things that give people excuses to not experience God. And then in Colossians, all things were made by and for God. He didn't just make creation and then walk away. Creation praises God. And again, when we destroy it, we limit its ability to point to God. So let's move on to the words that are used in creation, because sometimes I think they're misunderstood, and this has been really helpful for me to understand it too. Two creation stories, Genesis 1:28 and Genesis 2:15. There are four words used: subdue, rule, tend, and care, to describe our connection to creation, our role in creation. Subdue is the Hebrew for kabash, which is also used for control and make use of. So like a gardener would manage the garden. Rule is the Hebrew radah, or as in to cultivate, to make thrive, and to tend. So to make flourish. Tend is the Hebrew abad, and it's the same word that's in later on, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We will abad the Lord. That's the same word that's described with our relationship with creation. And then care is the Hebrew shamar, as in the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord bless you and shamar you. So there's this more of a sensibility, our role in caring, nurturing, causing to flourish with creation. And then one that a lot of people get stuck on is dominion. We've been given dominion. And I think there's a semantic issue going on. When we hear dominion, we think dominate. But the true sense of the term here in dominion, in Ezekiel, the same term is used to tend the flock. So it's dominion in the way that a shepherd tends a flock of sheep. And for an illustration, here's my preschool daughter, Jordan, demonstrating for us dominion over Alex the bunny. That's the kind of dominion the Genesis story is talking about. It's not dominion like a football game that ends 59-0. It's not that kind of dominion. It's not dominate. And if I give Jordan, if I drop her off at preschool, in effect, I give dominion of her to the preschool teachers. I don't want her to come back with scars and broken bones and crying because someone hurt her feelings. It's a preservation kind of responsibility. And then thanks to Matthew Sleeth, author of Serve God, Save the Planet, he did a study of other Hebrew works and found that sometimes the word that's used for dominion is used to mean being slightly higher on the root of a plant. So dominion is kind of a position near the top of a plant. It's a position of prominence, but it relies on the rest of the plant and it relies on the root. So when you read that, being given dominion, maybe think in these terms a little bit more. So let's move on to people. We're called to love God and love our neighbor. Worldwide, the World Health Organization estimates that 1.3 billion people live at risk to preventable toxins and hazards. Many of those people overlap with people who are at risk to preventable diseases, but also preventable toxins and hazards. And an estimated 2.5 million die of preventable environmentally based causes. Those are waste water, mostly due to lack of quality water, but also diseases that can be generated and exacerbated because of poor environmental concerns. And it breaks my heart to see these little boys playing next to a green pond. I can't even imagine what's in there. These are kids that actually go through the junk that washes down the river to try to scavenge stuff that they can reuse or sell. And it's the same water that's the latrine that they use for cooking. Now, it's easy to think of that going on out there. Let's come closer to home. I mentioned Camden, New Jersey a minute ago. The number one reason for any emergency room visit in southwestern New Jersey is a childhood asthma attack. And it's due to industry in that area. They're just pumping, billowing smoke into the atmosphere. It's funny, you get fined for leaving a gum wrapper on the sidewalk, but you can just pour smoke, toxic smoke into the atmosphere. But childhood asthma is a huge concern in a lot of industrialized areas. Childhood cancers. There was a study done by City of Denver in 2004 around the incidence of childhood cancer. And what they did was map all of the patients they had in the hospitals for over a period of time and tracked where they lived. And a child who was, I believe I have the statistics right, a child who lived on a street where there were 20,000 cars or more per day was 6 times more likely to have a childhood cancer than someone who lived on a road where there were less than 1,000 cars per day. So it's just that the amalgam, the non-point source of these pollutants in our life that are causing us harm. And then even closer to home, there's a picture on the right there that's a mega church here in Grand Rapids. They happen to size their parking lot for being able to accommodate everyone on Christmas and Easter. And a lot of that parking lot sits empty throughout the entire rest of the year. What happens is that during the summer, all that black asphalt just soaks up sunlight. It comes off the pavement like, the desert mirage, and it probably raises the ambient temperature in that neighborhood right here, estimated 3 to 5 degrees, just because there's an oven baking next to you outside. That starts to affect your comfort level. It starts to affect the comfort of wildlife in that area as well. And let's just talk about what healthier environments can do, especially when it comes to buildings. Schools that are built to green standards, next to new buildings that were built with not green standards. The U.S. Green Building Council has determined that there's a 7 to 18% increase in standardized testing in the green schools due to low VOC, air quality, acoustical environment, natural light, all those things. They also track that there's a 2.5 day earlier discharge from green hospitals on average, from non-green hospitals. And that's stunning. Think of the money that's baked into that. And then I'm asked, what about churches? Well, there's not enough data yet, because there's not enough churches that have done specifically green rated buildings. And we'll get into that in a minute. And then further on economic capital, designing your building well, spending a little bit more up front for green systems will save you money, will more than break even within 5 to 7 years, and then for the rest of that building's life will be a more economic building. You will make back your investment up front. We'll look at some statistics about that too. In retail stores know that their green stores perform better than their non-green stores. We've done now 2 green Meijer stores at our office. We've done some, we're starting to work with Toys R Us on some green stores as well. Factories show an increased production due to a lot less absenteeism and more pride of ownership and comfort in the workplace. And offices show productivity increase. There's a really famous study that the Rocky Mountain Institute did around the Denver Post Office. And the Denver Post Office was this 40-year-old building, flickering fluorescent light, and kind of a rundown place, and a lot of absenteeism, a lot of errors in letter filing. And they did a $300,000 renovation where they brought in fresh air, they cut some windows into the building, they replaced the lighting, and absenteeism went way down. They made their $300,000 back in the first year in terms of not having to go back and backtrack with misfiled mail, not having people with their medical claims for illness, those kinds of things. So interesting that, you know, greening up a building affects your utility costs, but the hidden cost that's hard to track is the productivity increases. Most churches, after the cost of the building, they spend more on staff than they do on utility bills. So it'd be nice to be able to increase everybody's sense of well-being. And that is, it's harder to track, but that's as useful or more useful than the pocketbook savings that you get. So here's the triple bottom line again: natural capital, human capital, economic capital. They all have something to do with stewardship. We thought, well, maybe there's a fourth P, and that is peacemaking. That fulfilling these 3 things with your facilities and the way you operate your facilities, there's a fourth P that's peacemaking, and it builds shalom capital. We're called to be bringers of shalom to the creation, bringers of shalom to other people. The economic benefits allowing us to perhaps bring more shalom, invest more money as a church in missions or in staff in order to do ministry instead of send it off to the utility company. And so why might churches go green? These are about 4 or 5 random things. But is anyone familiar with Unchristian? It's a book written in 2007 by Dave Kinnaman and Gabe Lyons, along with the Barna Group. And they surveyed tens of thousands of young people who identified themselves as unchurched. It's a very interesting study. They focused on the ages 16 to 29. And they asked them, well, a whole raft of questions. How do you feel about the Christian church? 16% had a good impression of present-day Christianity. 10% have a good impression of the term born again, and many didn't know what that meant. It just meant that word for somebody angry and yelling on television. And then 3% had a good impression of the word evangelical, and most did not know what the word meant. They just identified it with loud, lion-maned televangelists. They didn't really understand what evangelical was. So if you have evangelical in the name of your church, you might want to rethink it. Yet, another poll, Gallup, 94% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 2 years later, so much the same demographic, believe in a supernatural universal God. So, I mean, the church has a huge image problem. Okay, same group. Cone Incorporated, they're a market-based research firm. They did a study, the Millennial Cause Study, in 2006, almost the same age group, 13 to 25. Here's what they found about these kids. 83% will trust an organization more if it's socially and environmentally responsible. 89% are likely or very likely to switch from one brand to another if the second brand is associated with a social and environmental cause. And 74% are more likely to pay attention to an organization's message. And what do we have as a church but a message when they see that the company has a deep commitment to social and environmental cause? So one of the things about this that I find really interesting, Matthew Sleeth wrote a book called Serve God, Save the Planet, and it is in the bookstore here. I asked for them to stock it as part of this course. Matthew Sleeth has found, he's an evangelical Christian who has been going around to colleges. He calls himself an eco-evangelist, talking about the faith basis for environmentalism. He's been able to witness to people in such a way and in crowds that he wouldn't come into contact with if he were only an evangelist. And it is creating bridges from the Bible to these concerns. These people are naturally wired to want to preserve creation. And they come to his talk to try to understand the biblical basis for it. He's been able to lead people to Christ right after his presentations on creation care. Huge opportunities for him. The other thing he adds that's really interesting is that even secular scientists are beginning to really warm up to the idea of taking a Sabbath. That seventh day of rest is a hugely environmental concept. Don't drive, don't go shopping, don't buy, relax, be in nature. It really jives with that secular crowd. And that's another bridge that Matthew Sleeth is building. His next book is going to be called 24/6, about taking that seventh day off. And it's a command, and we don't always do it. Even my own church, there's people who go out to lunch right after worship. Why else might churches go green? It makes for a great story. Churches enjoy being recognized in the press, and the media is still really interested when the two apparent political opposites, at least in media land, connect on something. And these are all articles about God is green, and here's a church that's going green. And as an architecture firm, we're very interested in getting our works published. We want to be in the news. There's no such thing as bad publicity. But and we seek out, we send out press releases, and often it's crickets. But Time Magazine came to us when we designed the country's first green school in America, the Goodwill Environmental School in Ada, Michigan. And our building was on the cover of Time for Kids. We didn't even have to advertise it. They came to us. So green is still newsworthy, especially when it's connected with a spiritual cause. I didn't have time to put it in here. I just found it yesterday. But there was a New York Times article about a Lutheran church in Seattle that is knocking door to door, not promoting their church necessarily, but promoting a worksheet on sustainable initiatives you can use at home. And they're actually finding that people are checking out their church through that means. And so there are some real neat opportunities that way. And then, why might else churches go green? It promotes creation care to the church and to the community. Our church, Monroe Community Church downtown, every year has a green worship service outside where people in the church bring sustainable things or tips or tricks that they've been using at home. This guy, as a hobby, makes rain capture barrels that you can connect to your downspouts and then use that water in your garden instead of use drinking water for that. We promoted the curbside recycling system. We had a bus from the public transportation system, the Rapid in Grand Rapids. We had green crafts, and then we had a worship service where our pastor preached on Psalm 24:1, and we sang God of Wonders, and we sang All Creatures of Our God and King, and This is My Father's World, and the trees of the field will clap their hands. And on a beautiful, warm summer evening, the community who was biking by on that track just started to gather and gather and gather and surround us, these people we'd never met before. And it was just a really great bridge. We also had all these resources that we were handing out too, and coupons, and just a great way to get to know our neighbors there. And we've only been on that site for about 4 years. So it was a really good opportunity to get to know our neighbors. A new tool that we're planning to promote too, maybe at next year's green service, is Matthew Sleeth's wife, Nancy Sleeth, just wrote a book called Go Green, Save Green. And it's really about inside your home, how to manage your home carefully, save a lot of money, but also be kinder to the environment. And it's a whole book of tips and tricks, and it's all faith-based. And I've not read it yet, but I've read rave reviews. So how could a church measure creation care? These are just a few tools by which, there's so much green speak going on in the culture. How do we really know what's counting and what's sticking? What do we try that really works? Has anyone heard of LEED? L-E-E-D. Okay, it stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And just like your box of animal crackers has nutrition information required by the FDA, LEED is a way of stamping your building with air quality and how much sustainable materials you've used in that building, the quality of the water and how the water is used in the building, the efficiency of your mechanical system, your heating and your cooling and your ventilation, the degree of recycled or recyclable materials in your building, how well it's sited, is it connected to public transportation, is it nearby public transportation, is there a way for people to bicycle to your building and be able to take a shower and get to work that way. So a very holistic view of your building, and it's a rating system. And there's levels. There's certified, silver, gold, and platinum. And certified is the basic level. It meets, I believe, 50% of the LEED requirements, and then it goes 60, 70, and 80 for platinum. What might LEED look like? These are LEED buildings we've done here around Grand Rapids. Some of these look definitely like they're maybe a laboratory or there's something science fiction-y going on, a little bit like Starfleet Academy or something like that. But some of the buildings you would never know are necessarily a LEED building. A Girl Scout lodge, a loft renovation of a school, alternative ed school, a Meijer store that looks just like a regular Meijer store. This was Cornerstone Church. Andrew was there yesterday. And Cornerstone came to us 2 years ago. Well, we want to do a sustainable building. That's one of our core values. We're not sure about paying to have it go through the whole LEED process, but we want to be able to tell our constituents that it is LEED certifiable if we wanted to buy the stamp on the building and go through all the rigmarole of about a 3-inch thick binder that you have to submit, and it gets reviewed by an independent reviewer. And so we designed, Progressive has been a leader in sustainability for a number of years, and we just applied our best practices to this building and used our boilerplate specification early in design to test it. And what was so awesome is that the industry has changed to a point where we found that our boilerplate specification was only 2 points short of basic LEED certification. So we only needed to do a little bit of efficiency in the mechanical system. And we added shading devices to the windows to cut off the summer sun. And that was enough to at least confidently be able to tell the client, your building would be LEED certifiable if you chose to. And the interesting thing about LEED, LEED's goal is not more LEED buildings. LEED's goal ultimately is to change the industry. And when we did that environmental school in 2002, our architect, Jeff Runtema, also a Calvin grad, had to basically ride herd on the contractor to make sure that 50% of the construction waste of the project made it into the recycling dumpster instead of the landfill dumpster. That was 2002. Now, about 80 to 90% of construction waste goes to recycling, even if it's not a LEED project. So the industry has changed that fast in about 7, 8 years. So it's working. It's becoming more mainstream. LEED is also starting to work its way into building codes. There are a number of cities that require now all public buildings to be at least LEED silver. And there are towns like Boston, Austin, Texas, San Francisco, all those, Portland, Oregon, they're all requiring public buildings to be at least LEED silver. And then another one that we just did conceptual design for, Emmanuel Church in Huntington, Maryland, they decided to pull the trigger, and when this gets built, it will be a LEED certified building. They're on hold right now. Many of their constituents lost their jobs, unfortunately. They had jobs in the Republican administration. And in November 2009, they had about 20 to 30 families that suddenly were out of a job, January 20, I guess we would say, 2009. And so they put their building plans on hold while they found other jobs. The first question everyone asks, well, what does it cost to do that for our building? We can confidently say that in terms of your construction cost, depending on where your building is and what the infrastructure is for your building, it can cost 0 to about 2%. If all the stars align and you're on a site that has all those connections to public transportation and the right infrastructure, it can be a 0 premium. And that's not, this is assuming that you want a building that's going to last for 50 to 100 years. It's not, this is not, it wouldn't cost 0 above a Butler building or a pre-engineered metal building. That's a little harder to do. But you know, a building that's a quality building, it's a 0 premium. And that's even in our climate, in a northern climate like this. The U.S. Green Building Council requires you to register the project for $450 if your architect or engineer is a member of the U.S. GBC. And then the architecture, engineering, and construction administration cost is roughly $33,000. And that's because there's affidavits you need to file, there's photos you need to document during construction, during design. You have to submit energy calculations for the building. You have to take pictures of how the building is being operated and submit those. And it all goes together, either submit it online or you submit it in a 3-ring binder. And all of that work goes to the U.S. Green Building Council. And then they either, there's usually about a 3-step review process before they finally say, yes, you have a LEED certified building and here's your plaque. Live long and prosper. And so that's about the cost for that. One of the prerequisites is building commissioning, which means after the building's constructed, an independent third-party agent has to go through and basically testify that everything they see in the building is in fact what was on the drawings. So that the U.S. Green Building Council can say, okay, another set of eyes, the hen isn't watching, or the fox isn't guarding the hen house. Independent eyes agree that your building is what you said it was supposed to be. Because they only get the drawings. They don't go out and look at it. They hire an agent to do it for you. Now, this is a smart thing to do whether or not it's a LEED project. And I'll give you an example. On that Meyer store, that was a LEED project. And we said to Meyer, well, you're going to have to hire a commissioning agent. They're like, oh, do we have to? I mean, it is what the drawings say it is. Well, no, to do LEED, you have to hire the commissioning agent. And so they grumbled, but they brought the commissioning agent out, and the commissioning agent went through the building and found 2 rooftop units that had not been connected up to natural gas lines. And the commissioning agent actually helped them make sure that all of their equipment is operating correctly. Now Meyer does that even if they're not doing a LEED store, because it's like making sure you check out your rental car for dings and dents before you drive off with it and suddenly you're responsible for that chip in the windshield. It's a way to make sure that your building is operating the way it's supposed to operate. So it's a wise investment for only about $30 to $60 or 60 cents per square foot. Okay. So what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my building? I'm on a building committee, and our church or our school or our institution is going to do a new building. The Packard Foundation did a project. They wanted to test this. This is called the Los Altos project. And they imagined a $10 million building, an unspecified purpose, unspecified, climate, middle America somewhere. And this is a building of a quality that it would be expected to be there in 30 years. So they imagined, what these things are showing is, this is the level of LEED, the building cost. The cost, FF&E stands for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. The other things you need, like these, like this, like the projector, like the screen in a building. The fees for your architect and engineer to do that building. The total money, which is a summary of these 3 columns. The number of equivalent homes that facility would require in utilities. And then how much that building truly costs in 30 years and how much that building truly costs in 60 years. So the market rate building, typical building that you drive past, say it's a $10 million building, FF&E is about 13% of that. Fees between your architect, engineer, contractor, overhead, and profit, about 13%. So the total cost of that project is $12.6 million. That's your project budget. It would take, of a building that size, 461 homes to heat and cool that building. And in 33 years, the utility costs would be $22.7 million, and 60 years it would be $62.9 million. And that's at government suggested utility cost escalation. Who thinks utilities are going to get cheaper? Here's LEED certified, just basic LEED certification. It costs 1% more. Slightly, you have to buy better furniture and fixtures and equipment, Energy Star rated appliances, those things. Your fees are about the same, maybe a few $100,000 more. Total of $12.8 million. That LEED certified building only uses 250 homes worth of utilities. It saves $3 million in 30 years and $17 million over 60 years. Now, it gets better and better. I won't read them all the way I just did, but LEED certified, or LEED silver, LEED gold, LEED platinum. LEED platinum building is pretty hard to achieve. You're paying a 21% premium on the cost of the building. Over the 10 million, you're paying 12.1, but it's using a fifth as many homes worth of utilities, and over 60 years, that building has cost the same as the market rate building did in 30 years. So you're making that investment back in a huge, huge way. And we've now done over 100 LEED certified projects, and it's starting to ring true as we track energy usage. And just as an aside, a couple months ago we did our first LEED Platinum project, which was a renovation of a former welding shop for Steelcase that turned into their work lab, which was a kind of a think tank for the use of their furniture. A few other ways churches can measure creation care. There are a few good tools out there. Energy Star for congregations. This is a site that the EPA has done. And you can input your utility bills and the square footage of your building, and you can determine how well your building performs based on some national averages. So it's a good tool to track. And then they also give congregations that submit their story, they give an award every year, like a Green Congregation Award. And they, per year, I think there's several. So churches that green up their operations can win awards. There's a website called Web of Creation that has a guide for having your church become a green certified church. And that's not as much energy performance as do you operate your church in a green way? Do you teach on sustainability and creation care from the pulpit? Have you taken measures to reduce your paper usage, your electricity bill, those kinds of things? Green Globes is similar to LEED, but it's kind of UK and Canada based. It is not quite as robust as LEED, and it does not require a third party to ensure it, so it's more of a trust-based on your honor system. And then Care of Creation is a evangelical Christian group, and they are just about to put out a thing called 4Cs, which is Certified Creation Care Church. And I haven't seen it yet, but I got a call from Fred Gluck, who's running that, and it's about to go online. All of these resources and web links, I will give you a link to all of those links at the end, so don't feel like you have to jot all those down. Something that LEED does not track necessarily is adaptive reuse. These are 3 churches that we've done. Monroe Community Church that's my church, and it was on the tour yesterday. But we renovated 6,500 square feet for $80,000 for a total cost of $12 a square foot. And we leased that space for a bare minimum because we have a wonderful landlord who's very generous and just asks us, well, how much can you pay this year? He's a patron of our church and he wants to see us succeed, so it's an awesome situation. But a new building would be at a minimum $120 a square foot. So a very inexpensive way to get space. And we're using a space that was going to be abandoned anyway. a few more examples. Frontline Community Church, that's up on Plainfield and 5 Mile, and they bought the empty former Meyer headquarters building, and they renovated 35,900 square feet for $850,000 for about $23 a square foot. And then in Silicon Valley, Jubilee Christian Center bought an empty failed .com office building, and they renovated 80,000 square feet for $4.8 million. That was about a cost of $60 a square foot. Plus, they spent about the same for the building. So that's $120 a square foot, but in Silicon Valley, you can't do a building for less than 200 a square foot. So all these examples of that building was empty, it was not going to be used, it was going to start to fall apart, and a church moved in and fixed it up for a fraction of the cost. And it's a very sustainable thing to do. When I'm presenting to people who are in the trades, I ask them a trick question and ask them, well, what's the greenest building material there is? And often they say, well, bamboo or cork flooring or compact fluorescent light bulb. But the greenest building material is actually the one you never use, because there's already so much embodied energy in these buildings. In the life cycle of a building material, the most energy intensive period is when it's being extracted from its raw material and formed into its first material. It's not getting driven all over the country, it's not being erected, it's when it's being extracted from the earth or harvested from the earth. So if you've got stuff out there and you can put up with a column or two, it's much more inexpensive and much more green to use an existing building. I'm going to pass this out. We were asked a number of times by our church clients to have like a promotional poster or at least something that they can use maybe as a guide. And just please pass that around. It can make the rounds. It's all up here too, but you can take that back to your church, or maybe if you're about to form a green team at your church, these are some tips, maybe a little checklist that you can do. And we kind of base this on a few of the categories in LEAD. First of all, access and gathering. It sounds like a no-brainer, but as a church, you should create and maintain pedestrian access. There's so many church campuses where you can only get there by car. There's no sidewalk. Just have a sidewalk so that people can get dropped off or people can walk to your church and not risk their life crossing the great, huge parking lot. Provide bike parking and staff showers. We were working with Fountain Street Church in downtown Grand Rapids, and the young woman who leads the children's ministry will bike to work and take a shower in the janitor's closet, basically a sponge bath, because they don't have a shower. And that was too much information for us. It'd be a little awkward to need something in there and walk in, but she does it. Promote carpooling. There's I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember Help Win the War, Squeeze in One More. It's not only saving fuel, but it's a great way to greet one another in the morning, talk about your week, and then when you're driving home, maybe discuss the sermon or discuss your small group or that kind of thing. It's kind of like an instant small group. Pack a few more people in and save extra trips to church. And then size parking lots appropriately. This is one of our clients in Lansing. Here's the church. Here's all their parking. And they too, like that other church, built all this parking. Out here almost never gets used except for those big Sundays. What if they shuttled people over? This is all an industrial park. Find a partner, say, hey, can we use your parking lot for Christmas and Easter? And then just shuttle people back and forth. Well, you guys are being shuttled around today, and it's not a huge inconvenience. Light and water. Use natural landscaping. So many churches have these expansive green lawns, and then they put up signs, keep off the grass. It's often, pesticides and fertilizers are being used to keep that lawn so pristine, and then it doesn't even necessarily get used. And there are plant species that don't require irrigation. And they're nice too. Change your mindset a little bit about what kind of succulent plants or drought-resistant plants you can use. You can limit water using fixtures. There are fixtures that use fractions of the potable water in your toilets or in your faucets that are a pretty inexpensive retrofit on your existing plumbing. A huge one, and I would urge you to get started on this in all of your churches. Compact fluorescent and LED light fixtures pay for themselves in less than a year in terms of your energy bills. So those light bulbs are like, oh, do I really want to spend $5 on this light bulb when I could get this one for 60 cents? You will make that difference back in 12 months on your energy bills. It's a huge economic benefit. And then use task lighting. When I drive up and down 96 through the Cascade Road area at 11 at night, sometimes there's office buildings, these glass prisms, where all the lights are still on. And there might be one person there burning the midnight oil, but they had to turn the entire floor on so they had light, when they could use a task light just to work at their station and not have the entire bank of light on. We have task lights on every desk at our office. Energy. Invest in Energy Star appliances. They cost 10 to 20% more than a non-Energy Star appliance, but again, you will make that money back in lower energy costs, and typically they come with a longer warranty. So it's definitely an investment. Purchasing green power is an option. There's an organization in Michigan called Michigan Interfaith Power Light, and they're actually an electricity broker. You can buy your electricity through them, and they are paying, they are ensuring that the electricity that they buy comes from a certain proportion of renewable sources. So that's a way to use your utility bill to try to influence energy producers to change where they're getting their energy from. And in Michigan, they have wind power, and they burn trash to generate electricity instead of burning coal. And you can join that program and ensure that more of your electricity is coming from renewable sources. Conduct an energy audit. An energy audit looks at your building, tests its energy performance, and then says, if you made this change, it would take this long to make that money back. If you made this change, it would take this long to make that money back. And what it does is it empowers you. You can't really change what you can't measure. It gives you a measuring stick for how your building's doing, and you can make policy changes or physical equipment changes that, and you can find out an estimated amount of when that intervention would pay for itself. And there are some utility companies that will do that for you for free and then be paid. They will make their money by keeping your energy bills at your current rates for a period of time before it drops off. So they're kind of paid backwards than paying them ahead. So it's kind of an interesting way. You really don't know the difference until all of a sudden your rates start lowering. And use programmable building controls. A lot of buildings might get all the sun in one side of the building and not in the other, and somebody's freezing in one and boiling in the other. Programmable building controls and zoning your building effectively allows people to be more comfortable, and you're using less energy overall. We're almost done. Wellness. Become a no-smoking campus. Please don't throw your cigarette ends on the floor. The cockroaches are getting cancer. If you're not willing to become a no-smoking campus, at least designate a smoking area that is away from the fresh air intake into the building. We've seen that, actually. Purchase low VOC products, cleaning products. They've gotten a lot better. They kind of have a bad reputation that you have to scrub forever with this green cleaning product, but they've gotten a lot better. One that's overlooked, use and clean entry mats. A lot of pollutants get into the air in your building by coming in on people's shoes. And it's good to have entry mats both outside your vestibule and inside your vestibule, so that some of that gross stuff falls off before it gets into the building. And then replace filtration media on schedule, especially a church that doesn't have a full-time janitor or facility manager, and they're trying to push air. The air handling units are working so hard to push air through filters that look like that. Stewardship. Promote recycling. It's a great way to potentially invite your communities onto your campus. We have a paper gator at our church, and the whole business area, we're next to a 4-story business office, and they recycle all of their paper in our paper gator. And if we don't our church isn't in a neighborhood, it's more of in a business park. But if you're in a neighborhood, why not become the recycling center for your neighborhood? In Grand Rapids, they have curbside recycling for plastic, glass, and paper, but some other things that are more difficult, you have to take it down somewhere to the recycling plant. And maybe there's a way for the church to be a catalyst in your neighborhood so that this guy doesn't have to take it all downtown. Recommission your mechanical systems. Belts get stretched and bearings start to go bad. A good check of, it's like getting a tune-up on your car. Make sure your building's operating well. Use China or biodisposables. Here's a biodegradable cup. I wish I had a mug, but at least it's a biodegradable cup. Churches love coffee. Use shade-grown fair trade coffee if you can. All the coffee that Calvin is serving is that eco brand, and it's ensured that it's being grown in environmentally friendly ways, and it's providing a fair wage to the people working on those farms. And then reduce paper use. One of the things our church did was set up social media to deliver a lot of our newsletters through Facebook. And our only handout on Sunday is 1/3 of one sheet of 8.5 by 11. And it's just the immediate announcements. We no longer use a bulletin, and nearly everything is obtainable on our church website or on our Facebook site. Our church is a pretty young crowd, though. We have one retired couple in the whole church, but they're as active as anybody else on social media. And then ministry. Consider hosting a community garden. A lot of churches are blessed with a nice big site, and a great way to invite your community onto your campus is to host a community garden. We don't have any grass. We have a parking lot. But we got a C2C grant to establish a community garden in the Coit Hill Belknap area of Grand Rapids. And we use that to engage our community every Wednesday and Saturday morning in the growing season to say hi to our neighbors and interact with them in the community garden. And it's fun to go to sporting events, and it's fun to go to rock concerts and stuff like that, but just make sure your youth are also taking trips to nature. Maybe your church could adopt a stream, park, or road. It's free advertising. Usually there's a sign that says this half mile of the highway has been adopted by First Community Church. And then consider having that Creation Care Sunday. That website I showed you, Web of Creation, has a number of green liturgies for how you could possibly conduct a Green Sunday. And then just a few final thoughts, and then we'll get into resources. I like this quote because there's a lot of hubbub about the environment. There's a lot of political talk, and there's a lot of people arguing about it. But I think it starts way earlier than that. I can say I'm concerned about the environment because I'm a follower of God, because I'm a child of God. And I like how Howard Snyder put it, and this is way back in 1995, before green was on everyone's lips. Our belief in a creator, not crisis scenarios, drives our environmental concerns. And like the way we kicked off with that examination of Genesis, I think that's a Christian's position. In terms of tools, our website, our worship studio, the worship design team that I'm part of, is at worshipdesign.com, and there are links to all of these organizations. There's a little button called Resources, and you can go from worshipdesign.com to links to all of these. These are all faith-based advocates for environmentalism.
Is there any link on there to what goes into and how to plan a community garden? That's one of the resources we're looking for right now.
Oh, you know what? There's a discussion currently on the CRC's website, Justice Seekers.
Okay.
If you go to Justice Seekers, there's a conversation going on right now. You can sign up for a forum called Eco-Justice. And on Eco-Justice, there's Kate Koyman is the kind of forum director, and there's a conversation going on. And I'm sorry, I could give you the exact link, but I don't know it offhand.
But it's through justiceseekers.com.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's another resource that the CRC has they now have Justice Seekers magazine that comes out. And the first issue was February 2009, but it had, and it's cut off. I'll read it to you because it's on my screen. Maybe I can do this. Make it a little smaller because it's at the top. I guess not. It's http:// issue, which is spelled /crcjustice/docs. And
DOCS?
DOCS. And that issue and the other issues of Justice Seekers are on that site. And this one is good because the CRC started a grant program for churches that wanted to submit some green ideas that they had, and they could earn $500 for their green program. But this captures all the ideas that were submitted in an article form, and the entire issue is on that website I just read. Any other thoughts or questions? I know I'm the last thing between you and dinner, so, but I'll stay as long as you wish. Vespers, yeah.
Vespers first.
Yes.
Just a practical question. I'm fairly new to Grand Rapids. Which two Myers?
Oh, actually, it's, I don't even know the second one. The first one was Allen Park near Detroit.
Oh.
And that one, we sought LEED certified, and it actually got LEED silver without us trying. So it had enough credits to attain LEED silver.
I feel like I know Grand Rapids.
I cannot remember. And we just found out about the second one last week. I just heard people crowing about it in the office. But Allen Park is near Dearborn, yes.
Can you get LEED certification for residents, for a home, if you build it? Or?
There is LEED for homes, yes. It usually goes through the developer. The builder can submit for it, because a lot of homes are done without architects. But there are LEED guidelines for homes. There is also LEED for EB, which stands for existing building. And our own office was designed and built in 1991, but we recently got a LEED EB status for our own building. So you can retrofit and earn LEED status. Yes, sir.
I just read some literature that said that Grand Rapids has the most LEED certified buildings per capita of any place in the United States.
It does. And we have a mayor and a number of really strong proponents of that. Peter Wegge is one of them. He donates to a lot of building campaigns. Aquinas College had the very first sustainable business MBA program in the country. And the Jarecki Center that we designed for Aquinas at the time had the largest array of photovoltaic cells in the country.
Does Alvin have any LEED buildings?
Yes, the Bunker Interpretive Center is LEED Gold. Yes, sir.
What about green roofs? I know in Chicago they have I think most of the bigger buildings, new buildings have to have plants and stuff
Yes.
on the roof. Is any of that going on around here?
Oh, yes, yep. The central station, I'll go back to it. Maybe there's a picture of it. The central station of the, this building here. This building has a vegetated roof. And what's so beneficial about that is mainly instead of radiating the heat back into the atmosphere if it's black, or soaking it in if it's black, or radiating back if it's white, it captures heat and does not contribute to the heat, what's called a heat island effect of radiating that heat into your neighbors. It's also very friendly to animal life. And then you can reduce the amount of stormwater runoff you have for your building because it's a temporary holding place. It's like a detention pond on your roof. Yes?
Also, just a note on that, Eureka Creams downtown has a green roof on top as well. So that's your key to one of those places that you go through.
And there's actually one of the largest producers of green roofs is in Grand Haven, Michigan. They invented a way to do a green roof by not just spreading dirt and doing plants, but it's a tray system. It's basically a 2 foot by 1 foot interlocking tray system. They grow all the plants in their nursery. And then, so you could install it in December. Because the plants are all grown up, you don't have to go up there and water the roof and make sure those plants grow. But they, based on where your building is in terms of the plant zones, they can customize the mix of plants that are going to be in that tray system. They grow the whole thing, and then it just gets taken out to the site and laid on top of the membrane on your building.
It's a synthetic soil too, isn't it? Like.
It's a soil with crumbles of tires in it, but there is organic soil too. But they often add other things to it.
Sounds expensive.
Well, it depends on what materials you're going to use for your roof.
Yeah, I guess if it replaces some expensive roofing material.
Or if it replaces a lot of piping and a lot of, if you don't have a lot of room on your site for a detention or retention area,
Yeah,
then it could, it'd be a dynamite place to store that water. Thank you very much. I have cards up here. If your church is considering a build or a renovation, I'd be very pleased to speak with you. I'm willing to go on site and present this, or we'd love to have a chance to present our qualifications for your church.
Thank you.
Thank you.